I am Georgine Wright Nelson. I am an enrolled Klamath tribal member from the Klamath Tribes of Southern Oregon. I live in Chiloquin, Oregon. And my connection with the language is, number one, I'm Klamath, Modoc, and Paiute. So I grew up in families that spoke all those three languages. And now I am in the unique position of being the first language department director. The Klamath Tribes languages, the Klamath Tribes itself represents three cultures. The Klamath culture, Klamath tribe, the Modoc culture, the Modoc people, and the culture of the Numa, the Paiute people, Northern Paiute, and we have several different bands that make up each one of those individual tribes. So the unique thing about our languages is that they can be, they're unique in several different ways. They have a history, like Klamath and Modoc have a shared history, whereas Northern Paiute is completely separate. Different types of words are spoken, different types of intonations, different type of sentence structures, where the Klamath and Modoc have a shared non-configurational, which means that you can just kind of use this language any way that you want to see fit. In English class, for example, you're learned that we speak about a subject, an object, and a verb. Well, and it goes in that order, and you're taught to write that way. In the Klamath and the Modoc, the subject can be at the beginning of the sentence, it can be in the middle of the sentence, and it can be at the end of the sentence. So that's how we're pretty unique. Very few languages in the world have what is called non-configuration. When you're talking about language, you're talking about the fabric that a people communicate with. That is, everything about your language identifies what you're doing as a person. It requires your ability to communicate what you're doing. And I feel like the language itself, it encompasses everything about our world. It encompasses our foods, our families, our natural resources that we rely on to feed our families. So it's our world. The Klamath Tribes languages were all taught orally. That all changed when the Klamath Tribes went into treaty with the United States government in 1864. And with that treaty came life changes. Like the biggest one I'm going to say is boarding school, where the young children were taken out of the home, which was a disruption not only linguistically but socially and economically, because these kids are taken out to go learn English, and they are forced to learn English as their main language. What did that do to the people? Well, all the kids learn English and they learn boarding school life, and when they come home, they are able probably still to converse with grandparents and stuff, but more likely they're going to answer in English now. So there was a major break and a major disruption in the normalcy of speaking your own language at that point. Also, another big factor for tribal people became their way of life was totally disrupted. The chief system was taken out. Their religion was stopped. In place of that came tribal court, tribal police. There were judges in the court. There were people who also trained to become farmers and ranchers, and all this instruction is being done in English. And prior to Lewis and Clark even coming, there wasn't that's all we spoke. But then after Lewis and Clark and pre-reservation, people were coming out this way for gold, resources, and just coming and squatting on Indian land. And but they had things that made life a little bit easier, and Indians would converse with them. Indians felt compelled to learn their language so they could communicate and trade. And that's how cloth clothing came a part of the fashion. Metal pans and plates replaced, woven materials. So a little bit of convenience was coming into play, a little bit of life change. And then after the reservation, of course, and the boarding school system took over, everything changed. The method that I'm using right now is it's called Need to Know. It's a way that Robert Elliott from the University of Oregon has explained it to me. Teaching what you need to know. And so we focus on the vowel sounds, and we focus on the consonant sounds. So it's similar to like when you go to school and you learn the alphabet. So first you learn all of the cultural sounds of the Klamath and Modoc alphabet. And then you learn some contrasting differences, because there is definitely a reason to know the long vowel from the short vowel because of the different words you're creating with those sounds. Then you learn at least 5 sentences so that we can start learning communication. And this first 8 weeks is always sentences that have to do with introduction or standard greeting, because standard greeting is part of introduction. And then it's repetition, a lot of repetition. And then challenging students to say things loud in class so that they get used to using their own voice. We do have older people speaking on CDs or audio tape, and we don't really use that because then people tend to want to kind of mimic those speakers, and I'm trying to get them to use their own sound in their own language in their own way, because you're not going to be sounding like a 70-year-old man. You're going to be sounding like yourself, saying these cultural letters. Well, growing up, we were taught words. It was pre-booklet days. So our family did share with us how to say this, how to say that. And we kind of grew up saying phrases and stuff. I wasn't fluent by any means, but I was able to say some words and learn new words. And that was all introduced to me by my parents and my grandparents, and also other relatives in our family who could speak the language. And so I was familiar with the sounds, I was familiar with how it's spoken, and grew up hearing it, but never grew up communicating in the language. The vocabulary wasn't put into sentence format to where you absolutely can, like somebody would say, Waklisi, the English statement was, I'm good. Nobody replied in the language. But I heard Waklisi is the greeting, or how. I remember going to Warm Springs to see our relatives up there, and my great grandmother would always go, oh, how. She was so glad to see everybody. So now, I think that the biggest challenge is that English has been predominantly spoken in our tribe for the last probably 50 years, maybe 60, and trying to reverse that, or trying to get people to understand the importance of why you should be speaking your own language, why that should matter so much. And then our tribe is small. We only have just a tiny bit of income to be able to throw at this, so I'm having to come up with a lot of innovative ways, free services, free, book access. Technology is actually making it easier for us because I can put the booklets out there online now. They don't have to wait for it in the mail. They can get it. We want to be doing a dictionary with audio sound to it so that they can just hear those sounds and have continuous training. So we're having to develop some unique ways now for added preservation and for added teaching. This is like 24/7 availability nowadays. So, to create videos and stuff that would be interesting and entertaining, or either some sort of app. But then there's also the other thing that we have to be sure that our language isn't exploited by outside entities. That's another real danger. In the 1980s, I think, is when our tribe really started, about mid-1980s. We started knowing and addressing that we had language rememberers, but we didn't have any language speakers. And so we had an aged population then of fluent speakers in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who could fluently speak and converse. We had nobody underneath them who could. And so that became a concern of our tribe, and we wanted to preserve our language. So we have done some preservation work, and we have documented their speaking from that time period enough to be able to create a booklet, to create a vault of language sounds, what it used to sound like. And then if you read some of the materials of Gatchett and Samuel Gatchett and also M.A.R. Barker, it's noted in there that even when it was being studied by Gatchett in 1890 and Barker in the 1950s, that there was a difference in sounds from the original speak. So Barker's book, it states that you can tell the younger speakers from the older speakers by the way they pronounce their S's. The older S sound is more of a sh sound, and the new speakers, probably from influence of boarding schools, say S is more like in Sam. So, it was important for them to note those changes because we're wanting to really recapture that original sound of the language. Well, in 1999, I went to work for the Culture and Heritage Program, and we were just developing curriculum at that point and getting it into the schools. And that was something I was excited about then. I was excited to even have the book preserve the language because, like I said, I was being taught this by my parents pre-booklet. So when I started opening it up and I started reading these sounds and started seeing these meanings, I'm like, hey, Mom, I go, they got all your words in here. And so my mom says, they're not my words, they're our tribe's words. And because I'm like, wow, some of the things I already know are in this book. And I thought, wow, cool. And I could hear the language tapes. I always love to listen to older people talking. It makes me think of my grandparents. So when I hear language tapes and stuff and it's got the elders on there, it makes my heart just warm, and it makes me feel like my grandma is close to me. Um, because hearing language throws me back to being a child, 6'5", younger, near my grandmothers. They're the ones who helped raise me. And they're the ones who used to say the language all the time, and I was trying to figure out what they're saying, you know. And I want to talk like that. And um, when our parents, um, they got into the rodeo thing, and it was fun, but it was definitely, you know, hard because everybody in the rodeo world was drinkers, and that kind of broke our cultural connection, I think. And then I started playing softball, basketball, and all this type of stuff. And then I would go to different Indian reservations and stuff, and I could hear other people talking in their own language. And I go, wow, that's kind of cool. Then my brother, he got in trouble. He was on probation, and he did community service for our director back then. And that's how he started getting involved with language. And he was coming home and he's all gung ho, you know, like, let's do this, let's do this. And I go, you're just teaching us the same words we already know. So then he's like, no, there's new things. And so when I got to culture and heritage and I was working alongside him and stuff, I could see all the new things that they were trying to put together. And really excited to be around our elders who came in every day and talked the language. And so it was an exciting time to me. And when I went to the very first class, it was staff only. There wasn't any community members coming in. And I'm like, well, this sucks. So I started going out and I started papering the town with, you know, flyers and everything. And we'd have maybe one or two people come and then they wouldn't come back again. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for tribes, and I hear this a lot when I go to other trainings, is that this hectic lifestyle of sports and ballet and dance and powwow and all this other stuff, it is a challenge for families to squeeze in learning language. So my thought is, like I said, you know, you're not learning like you're learning French and Italian just to be cool with your friends in high school and learning French and Italian. You're learning your language to describe your living, to describe your life. When you're out at a powwow, you can greet somebody like the Navajo people can greet their people. You have that unique connection. Waklisi, Waklisi. Nobody else around you knows what you're saying but you and that other person. So you go into your little language cocoon, per se, and you can only carry on a conversation that somebody else is saying. So I think that that's important, but I see a lot of challenges to training. But one of the things that's made it cool from 1999, speeding up to 2022 when I started the language department, is I came in and I said, well, I'm going to look at what people like doing. How do they want to be trained? What has been successful? I'm going to build on the success and the stepping stones of the language program. And the former staff both shared with me that everybody really liked Zoom, and they had people from all over the country Zooming in to learn language on a certain night or a certain afternoon. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay, well, let's try this. And when I flew my first Zoom class, I had 64 people sign up. And I'm like, whoa, yeah, okay. But life happens. Learning our language is no different than learning any other language. I cannot dip you into a pool and pull you out a fluent speaker. You have to put in that work. You have to put in that training because you are learning a language that you really haven't focused on. and it takes time, effort. Well, one of the most important things about the preservation of the language for the Klamath tribes is that we had linguists come in from the University of Oregon and USC Berkeley, and we've had a history of this. The Klamath and the Modoc have been predominantly studied. Paiute, a little studied. But University of Oregon, Scott Delancey, Yana Underwriter, they all came in gung-ho with getting this language preserved and written down and building off of what the works of Barker and Gatchett and Spear. So that's pre-booklet. A U of O grad student came in and put the booklet together based on those dictionaries. And then they use the International Phonetic Alphabet to capture those cultural sounds. So that's why I do training on IPA, so that you understand that there is a reason why we use the letters that we do in the order that we do to produce the sounds that we do. There's rhyme and reason to it. For cultural preservation purposes, we focus on cultural sound now. And then you learn words, then you learn sentences, and then you practice them by sending me audio clips. So that's why I know that you have to practice language in order to say the sounds. So nobody's comfortable talking in language class at the very beginning. Everybody mumbles the sounds as we're getting started. But by the end of the 8 weeks, they're standing up loud and proud and they can introduce themselves. And that's after only 8 lessons and all their practice. So does this system work so far? It seems to be very successful. We've never gone this far. We've never gone through the entire book before, ever. So I think this is the smartness of our tribe to dedicate a single language program on this. And I'm very thankful that I had the training that I did to learn Japanese to develop this system to try to teach our tribal members. I try to make our classes fun. I try to make it to where they can share about their experience with language. I try to make it to where people are comfortable. And it's okay if you say it wrong. It's part of the learning process. And the more mistakes you make, the harder you're trying. So I'm going to be incorporating some new methods, probably a little bit more immersive than our first go-round with the next batch of speakers. And I hope it's just as much fun. But I went to Neely training, and Neely was born based on Yana's experience of developing the Klamath Tribes language. So the Northwest Language Institute of Indian Languages was created from her experience there. And then she started reaching out to other tribes in the Northwest, and now they teach Ichishkin in an immersive basis, which is wonderful. And I even learned some Ichishkin words, which brings about understanding of other tribes. The more you know about neighboring tribes and stuff, the more accepting you are, and you get to learn more about, it's cross-cultural training and interaction. So, and every tribe has horrible, things that were done, and that is, part of our history. But now in modern day times, we share this lack of ability to speak fluently. That's something we all share. And now we're coming together as tribes, working with talented people. I met some talented teachers, passionate teachers. And this work is not about an 8 to 5 job. This job is with you 24/7. It's your life. It's life work. Mm-hmm. And it helps build tribal community. These classes, I have watched people grow. I've watched people come together this is an unexpected byproduct of the class, but I saw tribalism coming to life. True tribalism. And now people excited about being able to speak, excited about expressing who they are. And I saw a 13-year-old girl on video who was a head girl dancer at a powwow here in Portland, Oregon. And she got up there, introduced herself in her tribal native tongue, and invited people to come dance with her in her tribal native tongue. And she's the first person from our tribe who's been a head staff dancer I've seen do this. So a lot of firsts are happening with our department in the first year, but I've seen tribal members who have, they're traveling powwow to powwow or event to event, and they're doing language lessons now out of their own booth. They're making little signs of language because they think it would be cool to have it on somebody's bumper sticker and you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic and they're reading a Klamath word. And so it's exposure for our language. Somebody said, I won't buy anything unless you can tell me every single word that's on there. And she just whipped it right out and goes, oh, I guess I'm buying some stickers. Well, first of all, I think my hope is that every single person who works in the Klamath tribes, and I don't care where you work, is saying a greeting at least to every single tribal member who comes and sits in front of them. I want it normalized. I want the greeting to be an everyday thing. We should be greeting one another in our own language. We should be able to reply in our own language. We should, each and every one of us, have the ability to introduce ourselves to somebody else in our own language. And I want it to where we learn the phrases well enough to where we can communicate what we want. You know, I want a cup of coffee. I want a donut. I want to go to McDonald's. I'm going to Kamoya. You know, it should be coming out as phrases as simple as I'm going to, I want. I want replacement of those everyday phrases. So what do I want? I want complete fluency in our languages. I said I want to create a system to where people can walk away with instant gratification of learning a language, and I think we're on to something right now. I think that the students who go through our classes now walk away with something every class, and a new ability. They can say more than what they said when they started the class, and it gives them a sense of accomplishment, a sense of I can do this, and we do it together. So we're building. I want it to be a healing for people. Because sometimes when you feel less than because you can't do something that you know you should be able to do, it plays mind games with you. And I want to take that away. I don't want that looming over our tribal members. They were born to speak these languages, and they should speak these languages if they want to. And I want to get it to where I told Jeannie, I said, I'm going to push George into allowing me to make it mandatory. If you work for the tribe, you have to take at least 8 weeks of language. So you're expressing your version of the language. And I've always told my students that because we were probably raised in environments where there was fluent speakers at one time, we still have that intonation. We're just using it with English. So once we start expressing our tribal words, then those tribal words are getting that cultural intonation you already possess. So when you're saying your words, it's coming out the way your family talks. That's why it's important to understand that we come from many different bands, and there's no right or wrong way to say these sounds. It's the way your family was talking. So that's how it's coming out in your natural speaking voice. So you already have the intonation, it's in your DNA. You're just now using it with your tribal language. That's how come I tell people, you know, oh, I say it this way. Well, say it that way. I'm not here to replace your family's teachings. If you heard it this way in your family, talk it that way. I'm just going, with the base of what linguists studied and heard, and this is a base starting point which can be very valuable to people who may not have grown up with those sounds. Because we had a lot of people taken out and adopted, taken out and raised in foster homes, and so there's no natural speakers in that environment. So this kind of is their first introduction to any cultural sound. We need to be able to say these words. We need to be able to express them at every drop of the hat. And then other tribal members are going to see us saying that. When I see tribal members now, and I'm out and about walking around, I do a lot of walking in Chiloquin just so I can see the tribal members. And somebody will walk out of a store and they'll see me and they'll go, "Hey, how are you, Mr. Jean?" And I'll go, "Waklisi, Daviditsky." I answer back in my language. Or either "How-oo," for Paiute people. And then "Uncha" for later. Sa su nu paniku, see you later. And so I think that when we start normalizing it ourselves, we start using it every day, especially those that are training in it now. If we can do that, and I mean, I have had some students tell me, "I can't practice because I don't have nobody to practice with." And I go, "Well, who have you taught it to? Because you guys who go through the training, you know way more than anybody else out there." And what am I always saying at the end of class? Go teach your friends, go teach your neighbors, go teach I don't care who you're teaching, your family, whoever, but teach somebody these words, because then you're building speakers with you. And you're also reinforcing what you learn. So that's how we learn, is by, that's part of the learning process, is teaching what you know. Mm-hmm. So when you start becoming normal with your language and using it every day, others around you will do the same thing. And they'll know, "Oh, he's Klamath. Oh, he's Modoc." It depends on how you introduce yourself. I just introduced myself to a group of students in my tribal language first. When I introduce myself, they don't know me. Like, I was walking down the street the other day, and this non-Indian was putting up his booth to be at the Friday market in Chiloquin. Early in the morning, he tells me, "Good morning." I tell him, "Dichin Busant," and "Pijawamua." And he looks at me, he goes, "What did you say?" And I'm on my way to work, and I'm walking, and I just said, "I said good morning in Klamath, Modoc, and Paiute." "Oh, thank you. Uncha." And I just keep going. If they're non-tribal, I just say it anyway. Why? Because that's my speak. That's who I am. I'm saying who I am every time I use those words. Gasasas sdasdool sn'eweets. Nua auxikni, choi modakni, choi numa. Nu a vasaksawaskani. My name is Georgine Nelson. My tribal name is sdasdool sn'eweets, which means Quail Woman. I am Klamath, Modoc, Paiute.